So hello and welcome to our live website Teardown. We're very excited to have you join us today. I'm Juliana Casale, Head of Marketing at Crazy Egg, and today we're going to be analyzing the website of our willing victim, the University of British Columbia, with the help of our friend Deborah from GuessTheTest.com. So I'm going to hand the reins over to our hosts so they can introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, this is JL from Crazy Egg. I am the Customer Success Pro lead here at Crazy Egg. Just to give you a brief introduction, if you're unfamiliar with our company, Crazy Egg is a website optimization platform that lets you see how your visitors are acting on your site. From our 5 snapshot reports, you can see where the activity is happening on your page, to viewing individual visitors' journeys through recordings, and testing ideas to improve your visitors' experience through A/B testing. Deborah?
Hey everyone, I'm Deborah O'Malley. I'm the founder of GuessTheTest.com, which is a digital marketing resource for people who are into conversion rate optimization, A/B testing, and UX strategy. And I'm also a Canadian, so we have a strong Canadian contingent today. So all those people in warm, sunny places like Santa Cruz and Dallas and Phoenix, I must say I'm very jealous because the snow has just melted here. I'm very excited to be on today's talk.
I'm also a new Canadian. I just moved from Boston, so we've got 3 Canadians leading this webinar, which is amazing. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to walk through today's agenda next. So here's a little preview of what we'll be covering over the next 30 minutes. So first of all, JL is going to give you a brief overview of conversion rate optimization, just so we're on the same page as we talk about it. Then we're going to get to what you're all here for, which is the live analysis of UBC. And lastly, we'll have a brief Q&A at the end. We want to save plenty of time for questions, but you can feel free to share any questions that you come up with in the chat as we go along, and you can always ask questions at the end in the chat box as well. So now JL is going to kick things off with what is CRO?
Thanks. All right, so CRO sometimes sounds complicated to many people, so I'm going to try to explain this in one sentence. My one sentence is, it's a back-end system for increasing the percentage of website visitors that take any desired action on your webpage. Pretty much a mouthful, right? So another way to think of CRO is it's about improving your visitors' experience on your page so that they take a desired action that you want. So a goal could be from making a purchase or getting them down your sales funnel to reading a product review, navigating flows. In short, it's all about the data. And CRO is not about using random tactics until one works, but rather it's about tracking what your visitors are doing on your page, such as tracking every click, watching recordings to see what individual visitors are doing, and then deciding and testing ideas of how to best optimize your page. There are many tools that marketers and site owners can use to optimize the path to conversion, but today we're just going to touch upon the most common ones: visitors reports, user sessions or recordings, and A/B testing. All of these tools are tools that can be used from the small business owner to the e-commerce brands, large, small, medium size, educational institutes, and agencies. So just moving on. Before we kick off the analysis today, I wanted to thank our customer Katra Ferha for volunteering UBC's website for this teardown. Katra, we promise to be gentle when we go through the analysis, and I'm hoping that if you or your team are in the attendance today, if you could please say hi in the chat.
She says hi. Amazing.
So for the purpose of today's analysis, we're going to go through UBC's Contact Us page. For those of you not familiar with what UBC stands for, it's the University of British Columbia. And we're going to have a look around the high amount of traffic and the importance of the contact page to UBC's funnel. So before, again, if we just have a look, and I'll pull up the page into a bigger format, just wondering if you guys in attendance on the chat could point out things that you notice about the contact page. So here it is. Let me just shrink it down just a little bit. Oh, maybe too much. I'll just scroll the page here. So what's the thing that stands out to you most about this contact page?
Anyone have any observations to share in the chat? There are no wrong answers. Lots of info, yep. Nothing stands out, no clear CTA. Awesome, guys. Who to contact, great. No contact form. Yeah. Okay, great. So yes, definitely all accurate observations. So we're gonna have Deborah take over on the next slide and show you what she observed and her recommendations for what to test based on those observations.
Okay, well, thank you. And I want to start off by saying that your guys' observations are absolutely spot on. And as you probably know, there's some issues with the fact that there's no clear CTA or no clear contact form. A lot of the information can be easily lost. So one of the powerful things about heat mapping data and what Crazy Egg can provide is it gives you a really clear visual indication of what visitors are doing on your website. So you can instantly look and understand how are users behaving and what are they doing. So when I was sent this information, that's exactly what I did. I looked at the heat mapping data and I said, what does this show? What kind of story is it telling us? And when you use heat mapping data, I encourage you to ask yourself that exact same question. What is the story that the heat mapping data is telling us through visual indications? And the first thing that I saw is that the contact us here, which is a header in kind of the hero image section, the large section at the top, received a lot of clicks. So in this visual element, everything that's being tracked is clicks on the page. And you can see on the very left, it kind of gives a scale of how many clicks are happening. So basically, the larger and darker the hotspot or those little click paths on the page, the more the element is being clicked. And so you can see immediately Contact Us is receiving a lot of clicks. But if you go to the page yourself, you can see it's not actually a clickable element. It looks like it is, and visitors are interacting with the page like it is, but it's not actually clickable. The same thing happens as you scroll down the page, and if we can go to the next slide, you can see more of the users are trying to click on elements that actually aren't clickable. So where the red arrows are, those are heavily clicked on aspects of the page. The top one is an address to send a form, but it's not clickable. And the bottom one, the bottom right, is Vancouver campus. People were trying to click on the address to send the form, but they weren't actually able to click it. So based on this information, I'd like to throw it out to the audience. What would you do, or what would you suggest to kind of fix this problem or to test ways to optimize this problem? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Any ideas? And there's really no right or wrong answer. Testing is really a matter of thinking about a hypothesis and testing through it. So if anyone has any thoughts. So Joseph is saying these elements should be made clickable. And Joseph, I completely agree with you. And that would be my first recommendation, is to test the effect of making these elements clickable so that, for example, if the phone number is clicked, it becomes a click-to-call element. So the user can directly make a phone call on a mobile device, for example, or through an application like Skype. Joseph also suggesting that maybe you could do a pop-up form to kind of make it clickable or make the element preemptive, and that's another great idea. But I think in this case, the easiest and most elegant solution would be to simply make the element clickable. JL, I know we were going to set up an A/B test. Are we going to do that at the end? Or did you want to show people now how we would go about doing that?
If it's okay with everyone, I would save this one to the end.
Okay, so at the end, we're going to actually dive deep into Crazy Egg and do some really fun stuff. And we're going to show you just how easy it is to set up an A/B test using Crazy Egg to create a clickable element. And so you'll be able to actually put this information into practice. So that would be the first recommendation that I would have for UBC, is to look at all the places with the click map data and see what are people clicking on that aren't actually clickable elements, and then go in and where relevant and where you're able to actually make those elements clickable. Does anyone have any other thoughts or suggestions? You can go ahead and type them in the chat box. All right, so if we move on to the next slide. As I mentioned, the testing recommendation is to make the elements clickable. And Aaron is saying maybe people are looking for directions. So that's a really good point. People maybe, instead of just wanting to click a place to send, let's say, their application form to, they might be looking for a map. So, potentially looking at making the element interactive with different functionality. A phone number, obviously, you should be able to call it. But an address, you should maybe be able to link to a Google Map or some kind of place where you can actually physically get directions. So looking at different ways to make those elements clickable for the proper context. So Aaron, that's a really great point. Okay, so for the next slide, we can look at here, this is heat mapping data, and it shows that people are using the Ask UBC a Question form, and it's one of the most clicked elements on the page. So you can see there that hotspot is indicating that it's very, very attended to. It's a very heavily looked at element of the page. But the problem is that it's at the very bottom of the form. If we advance to the next slide, another aspect in Crazy Egg is it can break down user behavior in different ways. So you can look by the number of clicks and the percentage of clicks that you're receiving on a specific aspect of your page. And it's, I think, a really valuable feature that you can also sort it by new or returning visitors, so you can see how both user cohorts are behaving. So here we can see that this part of the page received over 1,600 clicks, and that was 8% of the traffic was clicking on this element. Now that was the top element on the page, as we see in this next slide. So you can sort the visits on the page by the number of clicks, and Ask UBC a Question using the form is the most attended to or clicked on part of the page. So it's a very, very crucial element of the page, and it's what a large majority of visitors that are going to the page are looking for. But as I mentioned, it's at the very bottom of the page, so users have to scroll all the way down and read through all the links just to find it. If we could go back to the UBC site, maybe we could show that in sort of real time. So there it is. It's the very, very last line on the page. So based on what I've said, I'd like to again throw it out to the audience. What would you do in this case? What are some ideas that you would test, or what are some things that you might look at changing in order to increase the prominence of this FAQ form? So if people want to just type in their suggestions in the chat box. All right, so I'm seeing some great answers. Joseph is saying the button should be at the very top. Mary's saying move it to the top. Rory is saying a great big button above the fold. And so I think that we have pretty strong consensus, and I absolutely agree with you. I think burying at the bottom, the only argument that we have that's a positive for it is that it provokes what's called the recency effect, which is the last piece of information you remember the most. But otherwise, having it at the very bottom, it's getting buried. People aren't necessarily scrolling down. It's not above the fold, as Rory said. So moving it up to the very top, making a great big button, I think would be a fantastic thing to test. So I absolutely agree with all of you. And if we move to the next slide. There it is, proof in the pudding. That's exactly what I would suggest as well. So at the very top, under the Contact Us, having a big frequently asked questions button that people can click on and be able to ask questions. I think doing so would reduce scrolling, it would reduce the time spent on page, and it will increase conversions, and hopefully as well the number of happy users easily able to find specific information that they're looking for. Now, I want to point out that reducing scrolling and reducing time spent on page, they could actually be seen as kind of negative conversions effect. Some organizations look at the amount of time that users spend on a page, and the more time they spend on a page, that's often deemed as better. But in this case, if we can reduce the amount of time spent on page, we're helping the user find information that they're looking for quicker and easier. So paying attention to those KPIs and the context of them is really, really important. Anyone have any thoughts or questions on that? Okay, so Erin's saying that if they just open a form to ask questions, people will miss the top questions that are there at the bottom. So that's a great point. So maybe formatting it so that the questions are there, but in a more easy to access, understandable way, or having a frequently asked questions section where some of the questions are right there and immediately accessible. Because right now it seems like a lot of people are looking for that information, but they're not necessarily easily able to find it or scroll down to it. Erin also brings up a good point that the button could be an anchor to jump down to the bottom. So people stay on the page, but they can just click the button and go right down to the section that they need. So that could be another really excellent way to test the feasibility of this idea. If we go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so this is a scroll mapping view. This is also in Crazy Egg, and it's probably pretty intuitive for you at this point. But you can see that the darker the area, the more attention has been spent scrolling or looking at that field. So if we look at the page, the very bottom, which is the footer of the page, is dark blue. It means that really a lot of people haven't scrolled down to that section of the page. Interestingly, in about the middle of the page, the online form, it's receiving a lot of scrolls, a lot of attention. People seem to definitely be attending to the section, and they're highly engaged with it. They seem to be taking the time to scroll to it. And if we can look at the real UBC page, we can see how that scrolling might work. So you can see here that scrolling is definitely necessary. There's a lot to take in just one view, and especially if you're on mobile, you're going to need to be scrolling many, many times. But the heat mapping view indicates people are scrolling on the page. So they're engaged and they're looking for the information, but they may need to be scrolling to find key things they're looking for, like the Contact Us. All right, so going back to that view, we can see people are scrolling, but the online form section, which is near the very bottom, is one of the most heavily attended to sections, which is that red part there. To me, this data suggests that users are having to scroll through many sections of the page that aren't highly relevant to them. And it's very possible that some users are getting frustrated or leaving the page before they're scrolling to the relevant section. So based on that information, again, I'd like to throw it out to you. What would you do, or what would you suggest testing in this case to get the online form to a prominent place where it doesn't have to be scrolled to access? What are some of your thoughts? All right, so I'm seeing some great suggestions, moving it up to the top, and that's certainly one way to do it. The problem is if we start moving everything to the top, then the elements we've moved to the top start to compete with each other. We now have the contact form, we now have this online form. So if everything's moved to the top, what becomes the most visually prominent? My suggestion is to create collapsible fields. And it looks like Joseph is kind of thinking along the same lines, using an accordion to fold up all the sections. So if we go to the next slide. So this is a really interesting study. This is a real-life A/B test that was done by Intel. And it's on the Guess the Test site if you're interested in seeing it. I can send you a link to it if you'd like to find out more. And they had a really similar problem. Their goal was to get people to contact customer service so that they could sell more products. And you can see in version A, they had an expanded view. All the information was there. You could find it if you really hunted, but what they found is people just weren't looking. They weren't clicking that much, and they weren't contacting customer service as a result. In version B, what they did is they took the main sections and the main headings, and they made it so that if you clicked on that main section, you could click into the expanded view and see everything you're looking for. So I've kind of given away the answer here, but go ahead and take your best guess. Which version do you think won? The expanded view, version A, or the condensed view, version B? All right, I think it's pretty much unanimous. Everyone's saying version B, and you are absolutely right. Version B it is. It won with a very, very strong conversion lift. It was triple digits, and I'll just tell you the percentage increase by simply making this change. It was, just going to the answer right now, it was a 765% conversion lift, simply by making this change. That is absolutely huge. So if we go to the next slide, you can see Intel used a very, very similar process to get to this outstanding result. They looked first at where people were spending the most attention, and you can see based on the numbers, that's where people were kind of hovering or clicking the links, and then they used the scroll mapping view to see what people were clicking on and what they were paying attention to. And by doing that, they were able to get a really, really good sense of how users were behaving and how the audience was interacting with their page. From there, they were able to say, okay, if we test the effect of making an expanded or a collapsed view, we can assume with reasonable certainty that it's going to work. But you should never just assume and implement. You should always test if you can. So in doing that, they were able to have an absolutely huge conversion lift, and their success rate is through the roof now as a result. So I recommend that UBC could follow something similar. So if we go to the next slide. So UBC could potentially take some of their information that's in an expanded view with all these fields and collapse it into the most important sections and make it easy for people to quickly scan and find the section that they're looking for. If we can go to the next slide. So you can see it would look similar to this view. And if we scroll ahead. All right, now one thing that UBC did that, or sorry, Intel did that I think could be a really valuable testing idea for UBC is they had a chatbot on their page, and the chatbot was able to kind of direct people to the right section and get them on the right path so they can find the information. And if feasible for UBC, I would highly recommend testing the idea of installing a chatbot and seeing if a chatbot could assist people in finding the right information, finding the right questions on the UBC Contact Us page. So what it would do is probably reduce the strain of manually having to respond to student inquiries, and it would probably aid visitors in getting their specific questions answered. So those are some of my suggestions for UBC.
Amazing, Deborah. These are all awesome insights and recommendations. And I have to say, I really love your focus on using the reports to come up with and run A/B tests. I feel like a lot of people look at their report and they're not really sure what to do with it, or they make the observation and they stop there. So it's really important to take an action, because or else what is the point, really?
Definitely.
Well, yeah.
And the powerful thing about reports is it's giving you such a clear visual indication of how users are behaving on your page. So if you go into something like Google Analytics, you have all these numbers in front of you, and you have to kind of coalesce the numbers to create a story. But when something is visually there in front of you, especially if you're a visual person, as I am, and I assume a lot of you are too, it makes it so much easier to understand how your users are behaving and interacting with your page.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like you're a detective and you're figuring out, the motivations of people and how you can help them navigate, which is just so fun. Awesome. So I'm going to kick things over to JL, because she also has some points to make about observations, and also we want to get to how you set up an A/B test. So once we have all these insights, how do you actually take an action on that?
Alrighty. Thanks, Deborah. Thanks, Juliana. So I'm just going to make a few things, point out a few things that I noticed in looking through the Snapshot reports for UBC. And I'm going to keep it short. So if Katra and your team, if you guys want to connect more afterwards, we're more than happy to do that. The first thing that I wanted to point it out is I would recommend doing a new snapshot for this page where you have split out the traffic types. So this particular snapshot has phone and tablet visitors all tracked, so you can filter. We do place the clicks and scrolls appropriately based on elements, regardless of where they show up on a screen size. And again, the reason I would do that is the clickable areas up here that show as menu items for phone and tablet. So the list report, and I'm going to jump to the both tab, very important report to have a look at for several different reasons, but in particular when you have a mixture of device types and the volume is high, such as it is here, and I filtered, if I remember correctly, for phone. So we have over 6,000 visitors by phone coming and making clicks. The items that show up for, elements that show up for phone visitors, and that there could be some more behaviors that you could see from separating it out, just seeing that visual as opposed to this list part. So there's clicks happening on a link that is happening over here on the left-hand side. The other thing to point out about the list report, as Deborah was talking about, all the elements on the visible on this page, if you go to the both, which is combination again of the two, yes, you see that using this form is the top visible item, but you do have, and to be honest, I haven't looked, you do have this particular link that is even higher. So I would investigate to find out what this link is for and what popularity it's driving.
Yeah, that looks like a phone number.
Point. The other thing is with the overlay. So if we put both on, so live, again, for those who are unfamiliar, the live is anything that is a live link. So again, this is part of why I'm recommending breaking out the device traffic, because you have programs, there's a live link here for phone and tablet. Other are dead space clicks, as I call them, people clicking in areas that they think should take them somewhere. So much like Deborah pointed out, the Contact Us received 192 clicks, plus an additional 51 clicks just outside of it. So people are really looking for ways of actually contacting. But if you put the both tab or the both option on, the other thing that you can find out is, are you having any missed opportunities with your clicks? So let me go down here. So people that are clicking on clickable areas, but then you have people that are clicking on what are non-clickable areas, are all missed opportunities to improve the experience for them. So that is something I would look into a bit further. Particularly on this link, even though it's one missed opportunity, 63 links, this one actually shows up as a broken link at the moment. So something else to check into. And as Deborah was saying with the scroll map report, good engagement all the way through. An opportunity perhaps to decrease the banner size of the hero picture, make it a little bit smaller because people are scrolling right past it, to get at basically the meat and gravy of how do they get in touch with you. So those are just a few things to note on this page in adding to what Deborah said. The other thing I would do is check out the recordings and see if there is a lot of scrolling that is occurring. So if I click on recordings, particularly for the contact page, we know there's a lot of scrolling, but what we're looking for here is how much scrolling. Are they scrolling up and down? Are they scrolling right to the bottom to find the information? Put a little happy face there. Let it play the next one here. If you're seeing consistently about people scrolling down, to much of what the audience has been saying and to what Deborah has been saying, if it's the online forum that they're primarily going to try to find information, or this scrolling back up, they're looking for some type of contact information that they're not readily finding. This is where the opportunity for A/B testing really comes in from your analysis. So when you look at your 5 reports and snapshots and you start to see certain behavioral patterns, as we've pointed out, you come to recordings and you look for that additional information. Like if there's a lot of scrolling up and down, if there's a lot of lag time, which we're about to see here, and then it's going to get fast and furious again. So I'm going to skip it so it gets a little bit fast and furious to see what it was that they're after. This is all indications of how can you improve the visitor's experience so that they can capture or get to that content quicker. And again, that's where the A/B testing comes in, testing these various ideas out that you do. And then the one last thing while we're about to show you how to create an A/B test is always create snapshots on your A/B test. So regardless if you use Crazy Egg's A/B testing system to create your A/B test, or you're using a system like Optimizely X, which we do have an integration for. With all of that, you can use Crazy Egg in either of those systems to create your snapshots and have those 5 reports on your variant pages. So now you can go back and review and see, okay, what went well on the variant pages and what didn't. You can get snapshots and recordings for those. So I'm going to stop our recording and I'm going to jump over and grab a copy of this link and show you creating an A/B test in Crazy Egg. And Deborah, I'm going to need your assistance on reminding, somebody had a great idea about, like, if they're clicking, I think it was on a mailing address, that maybe they wanted to see a map.
Yeah, that was a really fantastic idea. So rather than just making the element itself clickable, bringing up, let's say, Google Map for the address itself.
Okay, so while that's pulling up, I need to go grab the address. I am going to grab, I'm going to actually grab this one. Let me go to Google Maps Canada. See what it will send me to. Alrighty. So I'm just going to grab that URL and I'll go back to the test. Okay, so this is the page pulled up in the editor, and I am just going to scroll down to right here, say by mail, and then click on that element. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can select the element, you can edit the text, and in the edit text, you can create a link. And you can add that link, the URL there. Yep. Add the URL there and then say open it up in a new window. And then if I was to preview this, and scroll down, now I can click in here and we can see that it opens up into a new window. I know I cheated, I right-hand clicked because I'm in the preview mode to do this. But when it's live, you click on it, it opens up into a new window, so you still have the person on your page, and it opens up the other content into a new browser window. You can just close this, leave that page, come back here. Now, A/B testing. Deborah, what would you suggest as far as A/B testing multiple things that you want to change?
Well, if you're able to accurately parse out the data and understand what changes are affecting conversion rates on what section of the page, I say go for it. So that would primarily be setting it up as what's known as a multivariate or an MBT test, where you're making multiple changes and you're attributing those changes to different kind of data points, and you're able to say, okay, changing, for example, the address to a clickable element was one element, and I can accurately see that that increased conversions, let's say 3%. And then minimizing the hero image section would be another change on the same page within the same test. As long as you can accurately attribute that change to a specific conversion lift or conversion decrease, then go for it. If you can do it in the same test set up as an MBT test. If you can't, I really strongly suggest that you run one test at a time so you know exactly what elements are having what conversion impact. And that makes testing a little bit slow, but it definitely is an iterative process, and you're in the end doing yourself a favor by going through that slow kind of iterative process so you know exactly what changes are having what effect. So that's my kind of testing advice.
Perfect. And with Crazy Eggs A/B testing, we use the multi-arm bandit methodology, or the mathematical theorem for A/B testing. So even if you do choose to create multivariants and test, it won't be as slow traditionally as one would expect because of the calculations that are happening in the background on our system. So let me go on and just click next and show you the rest of the process. Then I can explain a couple things. So here is, once you've made your changes on your test, you can select what is the goal for this particular test. Were you trying to sell more products, get more registration, get more page views, or was it another reason that you were doing that test? The other thing, once you've done that, is telling the system, okay, how does the system know that the test was successful? How does it know the goal was met? Was it that they clicked on some type of element, they reached a certain page, they submitted a form, or you can get more advanced and pick something else that would do it, such as if you had 2 CTA buttons located on a page that you wanted, no matter if they click the first one or the second one on the page, you would use this advanced one. If you have more questions on that, I encourage you to reach out to Crazy Egg support and the team will help you there. So I'm just going to say clicked on an element. Go back and just grab a copy of the link again. And I'm going to put the link right here. So, sorry. There we go. So by putting the link there in our editor or our system, it pulls up the page. It's just taking a moment. And now you can just say exactly where did they have to click in order to know that the goal was met. So if they got the right contact information, then I'm going to say they are applying to UBC. So you can name it, the goal, whatever you want. And then we click next. And then this is the last step. You get a chance to review the changes you made. You can rename the test, and that to something that makes a little bit more sense if you like. I do encourage use of the date. And then here's where I was talking about, always put a check mark in there to set up snapshots for your variant pages, and it will create new ones for the control page as well. And that will let you see how the test is doing overall. So Katra, I promise you I am going to turn this off immediately. We won't have this live for very long, but I am going to click Start My Test Ideas, just so I can show everyone one thing after this. So it's just going to take a moment here while it does that. And then we'll return to the dashboard. And right, I don't have any results yet. So with, I wanted to show that I have forgotten in this test is the results page. So the results page will not show until this is running. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes for it to run. So I'm going to stop this test. I'm actually going to delete it because I don't want this to go live on Katra's site. And what I wanted to show you was within the test, when you do actually have some results, with the multi-arm bandit methodology, from the first day that you create the test, the traffic is split evenly. But as the test carries on, at the end of each day, there's a calculation done to find out which page was having the most conversions or the most goals met. And at the start of the next day, once that calculation is done, the traffic actually splits again. So it doesn't remain a 50-50 split or a 60-40 split. It will keep alternating until one of the pages in the test reaches 95% or better. So depending on your traffic volume and depending how many variants that you have created, you can actually get results as quick as 1 week, or sometimes it can take longer. Rule of thumb is let it run at least 2 weeks to determine if it's reaching that 95% or better traffic. So,
yeah, and just to add to that, rule of thumb, I definitely encourage people to run a test for 2 weeks minimum because it smooths out any discrepancies in the data. So say, for example, you see, let's say you're selling shoes, for example, you see shoes sales spike on Saturdays. You want to make sure that that same spike happens the next Saturday so that you don't, you know, it's not just a fluke that happened. And running it for 2 weeks will allow you to more accurately assess that. So I think 2 weeks is a really good rule of thumb.
Awesome. That was really informative, JL, and thank you, Deborah, for all your suggestions. I think we definitely want to have some time for the Q&A before we part ways. So I know we had a question or two in the chat box as we went along, but does anyone else have any questions for Deborah and JL that they want answered?
So, Juliana, I see one question of looking for some help on implementing design changes based on Crazy Egg data. And I just want to jump in and say there that there's definitely some companies as provided, but we also do provide CRO coaching within Crazy Egg as well. So you can reach out to the team at any time and they can help. And some of our CRO experts are actually, one in particular is the head of our design team.
That's great. Yeah. And if anyone has any questions after this, if you're feeling a little shy about asking in the chat box, yes, you can definitely email help@crazyegg.com and we will be in touch with any resources you need. Well, if no one has questions, I don't want to keep everyone hostage. So I think we'll let everyone go. I think we can all agree this is really helpful. And for those of you still there, do you want us to do another one of these? Yes, always. Yes. I know Mary's like a serial attendee of these. Thank you. Okay. So it sounds like people are excited. We'll do another one. Oh, you're welcome, Katra. We really appreciate your volunteering your site. I know it's a little nerve-wracking, but hopefully you found this really valuable and you can launch that A/B test that JL set up. Wonderful. Okay, great. Oh, that's so nice to hear, Joseph. Thank you. Wonderful. So we'll wrap up. Just so you're aware, I will be sending out this recording to everyone who attended, as well as everyone who registered and could not attend, so they can watch it on demand. And Deborah will be following up with you all as well with some free resources in case you want to learn more about Guess the Test and A/B testing in general. So look out for that email in the next 24 to 48 hours. And yeah, in the meantime, if you have any questions for Crazy Egg, help@crazyegg.com is a great way to get in touch. Oh, great. Okay, awesome, Mary. Wonderful. Oh, cheerio. I love that. That's a good ending note. Okay, bye everyone.
And I want to say thanks so much to everyone who chimed in with their input and gave some fantastic testing suggestions.
Yes, you all are very smart. I really appreciate that too.
Definitely.
All right, thank you, Deborah, too, for hosting with us. This was amazing.
No problem. Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Wonderful. All right, signing off.
Bye, everyone.